So I'm going to start with just a little process. As Karen said, once a month I give the Dharma Talk here, and 2 weeks ago I had to give one in the middle of the month, so this is my second one in just a couple of weeks. And I have to admit, sometimes when I'm preparing to give this talk, I think, Buddhism and Zen is so basic and so simple. There's really not much to say about it. The Buddha taught that as human beings, we find ourselves in this situation of suffering. And basically, he said, our suffering is made out of our desire. And the antidote to suffering is to let go of your desire. Another way of saying that is the antidote to suffering is to let go of our self-centeredness. Because in the creation of I, sometimes we say I, my, me. I think that covers a lot of the function of the self. I want, this is mine, me, I'm important, me, I get what I want, me, I get to keep away what I don't want. And it's actually quite simple, theoretically. Of course, the complication is in the doing, because our lives are complicated, and we do want things, and we do get unhappy when things don't go our way, and we just find ourselves in this condition of wanting or not wanting, and things don't always go the way we want them to go. So anyway, I'm bringing this up because as it comes time to give the Dharma Talk, I have to think of, well, what should I talk about? I almost say the same thing all the time, no matter what. And then I think back to my teacher, Zen Master Bon Soeng, that gentleman up on the wall over there, and he always said the same thing. I mean, he's got a book this thick of the teachings of Buddhism, but essentially he said the same thing. Your self-centered desire causes you trouble. So in his phrase, he would say, put it all down, or don't make anything. And if you don't make anything, you get everything. But if you want something, you suffer. If you don't want something particularly, then there's no problem. It's so simple. And if you think about your life, I think you'll find it's true. We suffer because we want things, and when we don't get them, we're unhappy. If we do get them, we try to protect them, to make them stay. And, I have this set of beads, and I kind of like them. And if you want them, you might just come up and take them. So I have to protect what I want, because you're not trustworthy. I don't know what you're going to do. And, people do take things. And we all suffer from the reality of using each other as objects in our own story. So, in my life, I'm the main character. And everybody else is a supporting character whose job it is to make my life better. But there's a problem with this, because each one of you who is my supporting character is also the main character in your story. And I'm just a supporting character in yours. So there's a tension and a conflict. And as we live out that tension and conflict, we struggle. So sometimes it seems so simple, there's really nothing to say. The challenge is in the doing. So every month I think, okay, well, what am I going to talk about? And I'll grab this, or I'll grab that, and I start looking at books, I look for some good quotes. Maybe I'll start off with a quote. And those of you who have been coming for a while, I don't really prepare every word I'm going to say. I'll pick a topic and I kind of riff off that topic and see what it is that actually emerges. And for those of you who follow the videos that we put up, our ex-abbot Jason takes whatever I say, and he goes through it and he picks out a little 2 or 3 minute clip, and he puts it on our Facebook page, and he puts it on YouTube. And when I look at them, I kind of remember that I said that. But I think on YouTube there's about 100 of them now. And they all have a different name. He titles them. It's a wonderful thing. So I look through these things, and this, and this I say, and yeah, it's always a little bit different, which I'm sure is for those of you who come most every week, I'm sure it's good for you that it's a little bit different. You don't get too bored. But from my perspective, it's so simple to talk about. But also from my perspective, I know how difficult it is to actually do it. But the doing it is what's important. So when I talk, I'm giving you some, pejoratively we might say, I'm giving you some Dharma candy. So you get a little candy, it tastes good, and that's going to encourage you to practice. The most important thing that I can leave you with is practice. Do it. Don't think about it. The very first interview I had with Zen Master Bon Soeng, he went through what I now know is our very traditional first interview, and he did it in a much more scripted way than I do it at this point in my teaching. But he had a very clear message that he wanted to get out in the first interview. And we finished that first interview, and he looked at me and he said, "Now you know everything you need to know about Buddhism. You don't have to read any books. You don't have to know anything more. Just do it." Zen Master Bon Soeng used that phrase before Nike grabbed it. Just do it. That's the challenge. Just do it. It's such a powerful phrase. It means let go of all the things that hold you back and meet the moment as it is and do it. Do it. Show up. So often we're afraid. So often we think, I better not reveal myself, so I'll just kind of find a way to sneak through. But he said, no, just do it. Show up for this very moment. So on Wednesday nights, that's what I do. I just do it. I may have had a good day. I may have had a bad day. I might be anxious. I might be very grounded. But that's all just my personal experience. The more I get wrapped up in my personal experience, the less available I am to the moment that I'm in. The more I can let go of that I, my, me, and just show up, be present, reveal right now. What's the truth right now? That's our job as human beings. And that's also what scares the hell out of us. And in trying to avoid it, we make it worse. So with that set up, I came up with a quote that I want to talk about. But this is also a setup. It's just a setup to riff off of. And this is a quote that I teach in Mexico most every year. And one of the places that I teach in Mexico is not in our style of Zen. We're part of the Quantum School of Zen, which was founded again by that gentleman, Zen Master Bon Soeng, and we called him Sansanim, or De Sansanim. And he came here from Korea. He came to the United States in 1972. He had been teaching, actually, Korean people in Japan from the mid-60s on till about the early 70s. And apparently, the story goes at least, he read a magazine article about the hippie movement in the United States, and they were all talking about freedom. And he thought, wow, that's a great place for Zen. I'm going to go and check that out. I guess he was in his early 40s at the time. He was ready for a change, I suppose. And what he said was that when he got here, he discovered that the hippie movement seemed to be about external freedom. People wanted the freedom to grow their hair long. They wanted the freedom to have different kinds of sexual relationships. They wanted the freedom to move to the countryside rather than follow the path that was set up for them and their families. But he said what they lacked is an understanding of inner freedom. And this inner freedom is about unhinging from that self-centeredness. I becomes the king or the queen, and that's all that matters. And that hinders our ability to meet the moment as it is. So anyway, in Mexico, I teach in a Zen Center that actually follows more of a Japanese tradition. And in the Japanese tradition, they have a wooden block called a han. And where those of you who were here at the beginning of practice, we hit a motak, a wooden instrument. We hit it bum, 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 bum. And that calls you, we do that 5 minutes before practice begins, and that calls you into the Dharma room. This Japanese han is this big piece about that big wooden block, and it takes about 15 minutes if it's done all the way through to call people to practice. Same principle. And a han will usually have a poem written on it. The one that I've seen most often goes something like, "Life and death is a great matter. Don't waste time." Each one of us is going to die. We never know when that's going to be. Zen Master Bon Soeng used to say, "No one guarantees your life." Most of us in this room are fairly young. I include myself. I'm hitting the edge of fairly young, I think. But right now, looking around, so you figure, hey, I'm going to live a long time. There's always this feeling, yeah, death is going to happen, but it's way out there. But if you look at the people you've known in your life, some of you might have to go back to other generations. I know in my own experience, I know people who have died at just about every point in their life, in life. Back, it's almost 30 years ago, I was sitting a month-long meditation retreat. And one day I started reviewing my life, looking at all the people I know who had died. And I realized when I was in elementary school, somebody died. One of my earliest best friends, I moved away, but it turned out he died when he was about 18, 19 years old in a car accident. And as I went through, it's like almost at every point, I could point to somebody who died. But we don't really want to take that in. So we kind of pretend that, it happens to other people, but it doesn't happen to us. But the truth of the matter is, it does happen to us. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And for most of us, it'll be at some old age, and we'll think, well, okay, we won't care that much when it happens then. But everybody, all of us in this room, I think, know somebody who's died. And they probably cared. It mattered. Even when they're in their 90s, it matters. And we have to face our lives. What have we done with our lives? Who were we? People like to say that when you're on your deathbed, how much money you made, what you did for work, becomes much less important than how you actually lived, how you dealt with the relationships of your life. Some people might say, how well did you love? And these are things that aren't about the material things in life. They're about how we meet the situations in our life. And that's what Zen Buddhism is about. It's training to meet the actual situations in our life. So the poem that I'm talking about that's often on the Han will say, life and death are of great importance. Don't waste time. You don't know when it's going to happen. And of course, our final death maybe seems far off, but every moment is a kind of death. We get one chance. Probably everybody in this room had some series of experiences that happened today. Those will never come back. How'd you do? How'd you meet those moments? Did you stay hidden? Did you just do it? Did you show up? Did you reveal yourself? These are really the matters of great importance. And Zen practice, this very simple practice that we have here, the chanting, the bowing, the sitting, the talking, all of it is about how did I meet this moment? What did I do? How am I doing? Am I so self-centered that everything revolves around me? But you know, self-centeredness works the other way too. Am I so self-centered that I won't put any attention on myself? I put it all out there on other people. That's another kind of egocentricity. So we have to investigate our lives. So we start with the question, what am I? And we investigate and we look. So we just sat for 25 minutes. We talked last week. You can get relaxed and lose your edge. That's not practice. Practice is about completely connecting and being focused and aware on this particular moment. So our sitting practice is not about some kind of ease. It's this subtle coming to attention in a relaxed place in order to actually meet the moment. So, as we talked last week, there is something important about relaxation. So one aspect of this Zen practice that we do is breathing slowly in and breathing slowly out. For those of you who are new here, you may not have heard, you obviously didn't hear me say this. Many others of you hear it often. But we center ourselves in our lower abdomen. We bring our attention down and slowly breathe in and slowly breathe out and find some stability and calmness in this moment. But then we raise what we call great doubt. So we sharpen our focus. We don't fall asleep into that relaxation, but we sharpen our attention so that when the moment arises, we're there. There's an image that got used as a classic Zen book that was published in the United States probably 40 years ago. The founder of the San Francisco Zen Center, Suzuki Roshi, wrote a book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And I think it's somewhere in pages of page number 60, somewhere in there, there's a page that just has a drawing of a frog. And the reason they use the image of the frog is that a frog is a beautiful image for Zen meditation. Because a frog sits and calmly waits, but as soon as the fly comes in his view, the tongue goes out, grabs the fly, and stays present. So there's this kind of relaxed attention that we're cultivating. It's relaxed but ready. It's not relaxed and asleep. It's relaxed and attentive. Sometimes there's the image of a cat watching a mouse hole. The mouse is in there. And my cat can sit for hours. If it thinks there's a bird or a cat or a mouse, it'll just sit there and she'll just watch. And then there's a movement, and then she's moving. Unfortunately for us, she's actually quite a good hunter. And she understands how to kill. 2 days ago, we woke up and opened the front door, and there was a nice little rat right out front. We've had to close the window at night because she has a tendency to bring them in. She thinks she's doing as she's showing us. She's very proud. At least this one was dead. She for a while she had a habit of bringing them in alive. And then we were stuck with these big rats in the house. Neither my wife nor myself are very happy about that. Anyway, so I want to make one more point, which was supposed to be the whole point of my talk. I'm going to read this poem. I probably won't get to it. I didn't even get that far. But this is another one of those poems that could be on a Han. If you could actually Google this, there's pages that give you poems for a Han. This one, I've given a talk on this one before. It's quite lovely. Completely free from yes and no, great emptiness flows from within. Immersed in the mind of wonder, like a fish, like a fool. It's actually a wonderful Zen poem. I'm going to read it one more time. Completely free from yes and no, great emptiness flows from within. Immersed in the mind of wonder, like a fish, like a fool. I think I mostly want to, I'm going to comment on all the lines. I'm trying to leave some time for questions. The first one is quite important. Completely free from yes and no. This line kind of comes from the classic first line of the third patriarch's Zen poem, Reflections on Mind, I think it's called. And he says, the great way is not difficult for those who don't make distinctions. Distinctions is falling into duality, yes and no. So this amazing Zen teaching says, if you don't make yes and no, which is the creation of I, then already you're free, completely free from yes and no. But here's the problem. That's half true. The other half is we actually have to meet the moments of our lives. Karen said that when she introduced me that I'm a psychotherapist in my day job. It's a funny way of calling it. I spend a lot of time at that day job. And actually being a psychotherapist and being a Zen teacher, in my mind, are not very different. I'm actually dealing with exactly the same kinds of things. It's just the modality is different and sometimes the way I interact with people is different. And each of them actually each of them is supported by the other. I think psychotherapy practice is quite good for Zen students because we're always asking this question, what am I? And in meditation, our job is to observe that and watch. In psychotherapy, we have somebody helping us dig into that very same question. But the problem I just want to open up a little bit is, on one hand, we say completely free of yes and no. The great way is not difficult for those who don't make distinctions. On the other hand, is we have to live our lives. We have to choose. And I think there's actually, at first blush, there's a conflict, there's a tension between the two. Because on one hand, we're taught, put it all down. If you don't care, you're free. But in our lives, we have to care. Things do matter in our lives. If you don't pay attention while you're driving, you might kill somebody. And if you kill somebody, they're dead, and you did it. And you have to live with that. So just the simple act of driving calls us to choose and calls upon us to care. It matters what we do. So on one hand, we're saying, don't let anything matter. And on the other hand, we're saying, everything you do matters completely. Back when I was in college, I was reading the series of books, The Teachings of Don Juan by Carlos Castaneda. Those were actually my entry books into the spiritual practice world, I suppose. And he had a line. He said, live your life as if everything you're doing is actually the most important thing in the world, while at the very same time remembering that it doesn't matter at all. And that's non-duality. It includes both. We often hear this word non-dual, non-duality, and we think no yes, no no. So if you don't care, that's that side, that's non-dualistic. Except that's one-sided. To include everything means it doesn't matter and it matters completely. And we actually have to hold both of them at the exact moment that we're in. So that's not easy to do. And all of us at any moment will probably lean too much one way or too much of another way. So sometimes in my Zen teaching, I have to point people toward, it really doesn't matter. But at another time, I might have to point them to, it's the most important thing. It's both and. And that's actually quite difficult for us to hold. And in a way, one of the things we're cultivating in our meditation practice is the ability to hold opposites and not see them in such a way that they cancel each other out, but to get more comfortable with this proposition of both and. It matters and it doesn't matter. I am the center of the universe, and I'm totally insignificant. Nobody else lives my life. Nobody else lives the life that you live. And nobody else is responsible for just what we're responsible for. That's our own uniqueness. And at the very same moment, we're one of 7 billion people on a rock floating in space that has, you couldn't even count the organisms that live on this planet. And only our imagination could imagine what it's like in the cosmos. They say the universe is over 13 billion light years big. And if you look at some of the photographs that the Hubble spacecraft has put up of these what to me look like organisms that they call galaxies. How many billions and trillions of stars and planets and all these things exist we can't even imagine. We see stars and we see what they looked like billions of years ago. We don't even know what they look like now. So we're the most significant and we're totally insignificant, both at the same time. And how we hold that tension, how we hold that both and, has a lot to do with the kind of life that we have and the kind of life that we help those around us live. If we hold ourselves too importantly, then we treat everybody else and everything else around us as less important and more insignificant. And generally when we do that, we treat them rather poorly. If we hold ourselves as too insignificant, we miss the life and death moment that we're actually in. It's both and. It's not either or. And both and is actually quite difficult for us to hold. We're almost always leaning this way or that way. And practice is not a static place. If we find ourselves listing this way, we come upright. When we find ourselves listing this way, we come upright. So in many ways, practice is It's like that gyroscope, I think it's called, that's constantly trying to find center ground. But it's not a static place. We're always having to correct. We have to pay attention. We train ourselves to hone our attention so that we're aware of what it is that's actually happening, not our story and our dream of what's happening. That's the other thing that the Buddha taught. We have to see things clearly in order to live a clear life. But we're usually so blinded by our conditioning and our story that we lose sight of what's actually going on. So we have to clear our minds so that we can see clearly. I could go on with this, but I think I'll stop for right now and I'll pick up this story maybe next month. But I want to take some time for questions or comments and see if there's anything people need some more coverage on. Yes, sir.
You just finished with saying that we have to clear our minds. When you say that, I immediately think, stop thinking. Correct?
You've got to clear that out too. That's your story. So you hear, clear your mind, and that says to you, stop thinking. But that's your story. Clear that away too. That's just getting in your way. You can spend the rest of your life trying to stop thinking, and I bet you won't succeed. So stop now. Don't waste your time. Better, the way we would talk about it, is work with lessening the attachment to your thinking, so that your thinking isn't tossing you around so much. If you don't attach to your thinking, then you can use your thinking. But when you attach to your thinking is the boss and you're the slave. So don't worry about stopping it. Just lessen its hold upon you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, of course, the hard part is the doing it. But don't waste your time stopping it. Even if you stop it, it'll start again. So don't waste your time. Lessen your attachment to it. I think you'll find that more valuable.